I never thought I'd see the house again. Not really. Sure, it crept into my dreams now and then. The creak of the porch swing, the smell of my mother's rosewater perfume lingering in the hallway, the sight of golden leaves brushing against the attic window. But those were memories half faded and out of reach, much like my relationship with my sister. 30 years. That's how long it had been since I last stood on the front steps of 108 Maple Hill Road. A lifetime ago, really. But now, I was here again, standing beside a lawyer's rented car, looking at the peeling white paint and the ivy-choked siding of the house where we grew up. My name is David Hill, and I hadn't spoken to my sister Emily in 3 decades. It started with an argument. Don't they all? A Thanksgiving dinner gone wrong. Too many things unsaid, too many things said with too much heat. Our father had been gone 2 years by then, and our mother, bless her, tried to keep us close. But grief changes people. It certainly changed me. I left the next morning, tossing a duffel bag into my old Ford and vowing never to come back. I kept that vow until Mom died. Her lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Walter Leeds, had called 2 weeks ago with the news. She passed peacefully, he'd said. She left something for both of you, a letter and a request. The funeral was simple. Emily didn't come. That stung more than I cared to admit. But Walter had handed me the letter afterward, sealed in an envelope with my mother's delicate handwriting on the front. To David and Emily, together. Together. Walter must have seen confusion, or maybe the regret, on my face. She asked that you both return to the house, to open it there. So here I was, 59 years old, widowed, retired, and back on the same cracked walkway I'd ridden my tricycle down at age 5. I stepped up to the door. The key still worked. The air inside was thick. Dust motes floated in the sunlight like ghosts. Everything was preserved like a time capsule. Mom had lived here until the very end, apparently refusing to update anything past 1979. My hand trembled slightly as I flicked the light switch. The bulb above the stairs flickered but held. And that's when I heard it, the soft sound of footsteps upstairs. I froze, then a voice tentative. David, Emily. I almost didn't recognize her. Her voice, once sharp and quick, was softer now, tired, like she hadn't slept in years. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as she descended the stairs, a worn cardigan wrapped around her like armor. I could say the same. Silence hung between us. Thick and awkward, she reached into her bag and held up the same envelope. I got the letter too. We sat in the living room, on the same sunken couch we used to jump on as kids. Across from us, the fireplace mantel still held our childhood photos. My senior picture, Emily's dance recital portrait. She opened the letter. Her hand shook a little, and for a moment I saw not the stranger I hadn't spoken to in years, but the girl who once helped me build a treehouse in the backyard. Mom's handwriting was faded but clear. My dear children, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I didn't want to leave without trying, one last time, to bring you both back here, to each other. There are things in this house I could never say aloud, things I hope you'll discover together. I don't ask for forgiveness, only for understanding. Please spend time here. Open the attic, read the letters, find the truth I couldn't speak. With all my love, Mom. Emily looked up, eyes rimmed red. The attic? I nodded, but something inside me twisted. The attic. That place was forbidden when we were kids. Always locked. Always off limits. We should go up, I said. She hesitated. Now! If not now, when? The stairs creaked under our weight, groaning like they remembered every fight we'd ever had. The attic door was still locked, but the key hung on a hook just beside it. Mom had made sure we'd find it. Inside, the attic smelled like cedar and dust. Old trunks lined the walls, and in the middle sat a small wooden writing desk. On it, a box. Emily lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, tied in bundles with ribbon. Some were addressed to me, others to her. A third stack bore no names at all. She handed me one. I opened it. Dear David, I know I failed you. I know I pushed too hard when you needed patience. I wanted you to be strong, like your father, But I didn't realize you were already strong. In your own way, you were always my quiet one, the one who saw everything and said nothing. I wish I had listened more. I wish I had said I was proud of you. I always was. Please forgive me. Love, Mom. I couldn't breathe. Emily read hers in silence, then let out a shaky breath. She wrote these for years. We spent the next hour going through them, uncovering our mother's regrets, her memories, her love poured out in ink, letters about Dad's last days, about how she felt losing him, about how much she blamed herself for the rift between us. And then we found the journals, leather-bound, dates spanning decades. Emily flipped one open, then froze. David, she wrote about us. There we were, in her words. Our childhood, our fights, our birthdays, every moment we'd forgotten, she had saved. She never stopped hoping we'd make up. I whispered, "No," Emily said, her voice cracking. She never did. We sat there until dusk, the golden light filtering through the attic window. The house groaned as it cooled, like it too was remembering. And in that silence, something shifted. Not everything was healed. Not yet. But for the first time in 30 years, we were both here, reading, listening, beginning again. It's strange how time folds in on itself. The longer we stayed in the house, the more it felt like stepping into a dream. The kind where you recognize a place, but everything feels slightly off. Familiar, yet fragile. David and I didn't talk much the next morning. We each took separate rooms, the same ones we'd growing up, and the air between us was thick with both nostalgia and old wounds. I hadn't slept well, not because of the mattress or the creaking rafters, but because of what we'd found in the attic, the letters, the journals. Mom's words haunted me all night. I kept thinking about how she wrote to us, but never gave the letters while she was alive. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment. Maybe she was afraid we wouldn't listen. I wandered downstairs barefoot to find David already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of black coffee and staring out the window above the sink. He didn't look at me when I entered, but he slid the coffee pot silently toward me, a piece offering in ceramic and steam. "I forgot how quiet it is out here," he said after a long pause. "The city never shuts up." I nodded, taking a sip. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was dense, like the house itself had taken a vow of hush after Mom died. "I thought I heard something break last night," I said, remembering the sharp sound around midnight. "Glass." David looked over his shoulder. "Yeah, I heard it too. Thought it was just the wind." We both knew better. This house didn't make sounds like that on its own. We found the source in the sitting room, the far window overlooking the garden. One of the small panes had a crack running through it like a jagged lightning bolt. A spider had spun a web in the corner, its threads catching the morning sun. I crouched, running a finger gently along the crack. "This wasn't here yesterday," I murmured. David said nothing, but I caught him glancing at the baseboard near the window. Something glimmered, a shard of glass. He picked it up, then stood, staring down at the back garden beyond. "What?" I asked. "That gate," he said. "It's open." My heart thudded. The garden gate had always been a mystery to us as kids. It led to a small wooded area that sloped downward into the old orchard. Our father used to tell us fairy stories about it, how spirits lived in the trees, and how the gate was their door to the world of men. We never believed him, but after he passed, Mom had locked the gate with a rusted chain and nail, said it was unsafe. And yet, now it swung gently in the breeze. David and I walked out together, not saying anything. The backyard had grown wild. Roses tangled with weeds, ivy crawled across the trellises, and the vegetable garden had turned into a mess of volunteer plants and forgotten borders. But the gate was still there, just as we remembered. The chain was on the ground. "I didn't open it," I said. "Me neither." He pushed it open slowly, and we both stepped through. The orchard hadn't changed much. The trees were older, twisted more than I remembered, but they still carried that same hush. Apples, small and worm-eaten, dotted the ground. Beyond them, the remains of our old treehouse stood, or what was left of it, a single plank nailed to a trunk, a rope ladder eaten through by time. I glanced sideways. David was staring up at it. "We built this a summer before Dad died," he said. "I remember," I replied. "He helped us, even though Mom said it was too dangerous." He chuckled once, a sound more sad than amused. He let us fall a few times, and then helped us back up. We stood there, quiet again, until David turned to me. "Why didn't you come to the funeral?" There it was. I looked away, shame prickling at my neck. I didn't find out until a day after. I'd moved, changed numbers. We hadn't talked in years. I didn't know. "She asked about you," he said. "A lot." I nodded. "I know." He didn't press further, and for that I was grateful. Some questions take more time than a single conversation allows. We walked back toward the house, and that's when I noticed it. Something wedged under the porch steps. A corner of a shoebox, just visible beneath the third plank. "Wait," I said, crouching. I pulled it out, a dusty, faded box sealed with masking tape. Written in Mom's handwriting on the lid were the words, "Do not open without both of you present." David squatted beside me. "Another treasure chest?" I smiled despite myself. "Looks like it." We brought it inside and opened it in the living room. Inside were items from our childhood. Photos, report cards, drawings, David's old baseball glove, a lock of hair, and a labeled envelope for my first haircut. Beneath all that, wrapped in tissue paper, was a cassette tape. David raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" There was a small label on the side. "For my children, play together." We searched the house for something that could play it. Eventually, in the hall closet behind a stack of board games and winter coats, we found Dad's old stereo. It still worked after fashion. David popped in the tape, and after a moment of static and a few mechanical clicks, we heard her voice. "Mom, hello, my darlings. If you're listening to this, it means you finally come home." Her voice was older than I remembered, fragile, but so full of love I felt my chest ache. There were things I could never say while I was alive. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. Your father, he kept so many secrets, and I carried the weight of them after he was gone. In the attic, there's a cedar box hidden beneath the floorboards. I couldn't bring myself to open it after he died, but I think now it's time you both know the truth. I looked at David. He was pale, lips pressed tight. "She's talking about Dad?" he asked. I nodded slowly. Apparently, the tape clicked off. Just like that. No explanation. No hint of what the truth was. David stood. "Let's go." We found the box beneath a loose floorboard near the window, just where she said it would be. It was heavy. The cedar was stained and scratched, and it smelled faintly of mothballs and old tobacco. Inside were papers. Dozens of them. Letters, photographs, even an old military uniform badge. And at the bottom, a birth certificate. But it wasn't David's. Or mine. It was for someone named Nathaniel John Hill. Born 1956. Died 1960. David read the name aloud, frowning. Who the hell is Nathaniel? I had no answer, but the photograph beneath it showed a boy, about 4 years old, with our father's eyes. Our family was no longer what we thought it was. And suddenly, 30 years of silence between us seemed like the least of our mysteries. We sat there, cross-legged on the attic floor, the cedar box between us, and the birth certificate resting on David's knee like a stone. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The dust swirled in the golden shaft of light cutting to the attic window, and the tape deck on the floor still hissed with static long after Mom's voice had faded. Nathaniel John Hill, born 1956, died 1960. For years old, a name we'd never heard, a brother we never knew we had. Finally, David cleared his throat. He would have been older than both of us. By a lot, I said quietly. He died before we were even born. Why wouldn't they tell us? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was pick up one of the old letters from the box. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting looping and delicate. It was addressed to our father, James Hill, and dated 1961. My eyes skimmed the words. Asterisk James. I don't know if I can stay here. Everything in this house reminds me of him. The way the floor creaks outside his room. The sound of wind in the orchard trees. I keep thinking I'll see him around every corner. But I don't. And that's somehow worse. Asterisk. I handed it to David, and he read it silently. Mom wrote this, he said, a year after, which means she stayed. She stayed with Dad even after losing a child. David nodded slowly and never told us. There were more letters. Most of them were short fragments, really. Notes scribbled on the backs of receipts. Pages torn from notebooks. All full of grief. Some of rage. One in particular stood out. He didn't just fall. I know it. You weren't watching him. You said you were. But I found the beer bottles. I know you were drunk. David looked up, stunned. She blamed him? Sounds like it. We were silent again. The weight of that truth was unbearable. Our father, the man who built us a treehouse, who tucked us in at night, had lost a son, and Mom believed it was his fault. Why stay? David muttered. I shook my head. Maybe she loved him too much. Or maybe she thought we needed a father, even if he was broken. The air in the attic felt too thick to breathe. We gathered the papers back into the box and carried it downstairs, neither of us saying much until we reached the kitchen again. David placed the box gently on the counter, then leaned against the fridge. Do you remember how Dad used to disappear for hours? I did. Long walks, sudden errands, always coming back smelling faintly of tobacco and engine oil. I used to think he was just weird, I said, but maybe he was escaping something. David opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope from beneath a phone book. Found this yesterday. Didn't open it. Didn't feel right until now. He handed it to me. It was addressed to my children. Inside was a letter. Dad's handwriting, sharp, no nonsense, like the man himself. Asterisk if you're reading this. It means I'm gone, and you started digging into things I buried. Fair enough. Maybe it's time. Nathaniel was your brother. He died in a fall. An accident, but not a clean one. I'd had a few drinks. I was supposed to be watching him, and I wasn't. Your mother never forgave me. Truth be told, I never forgave myself either. We tried again. That's what your mother called it. Try again. Like love was something you could replace. But the truth is, I never stopped seeing him in both of you. I loved you boys. But I couldn't ever love you without the weight of that guilt. And that's not your fault. That's mine, asterisk. I folded the letter back up slowly. David sat down. His hands were shaking. We were ghosts to him. No, I said. He tried. He stayed. That counts for something. David looked at me. Does it? I didn't know, but I wanted to believe it. That night, we sat on the back porch, watching the stars prick through the navy sky. The old wind chime above us sang with the breeze. David had brought out 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon we found in the pantry. Neither of us said much for a while. We should find his grave, David said finally. Nathaniel's? I nodded. Tomorrow. But sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept thinking of the photo, the boy with our father's eyes, the forgotten name. Some families bury more than just their dead. Ours had buried the truth. And now, we were digging it back up, piece by painful piece. The next morning broke pale and quiet. David already made coffee by the time I came down. The house smelled like dust and cinnamon, the past clinging to everything like cobwebs. We didn't speak much as we ate toast and drank coffee from Mom's old mugs, the ones with the faded sunflowers on the sides. When we finally left the house, the day had warmed just enough to take the edge off the autumn chill. The cemetery was only a few miles outside town, tucked behind a rusted iron gate and flanked by towering oaks that bowed with age. We remembered it from when we were kids, the place where field trips came to learn local history, not grief. We had no map, just a name and a date. The caretaker, an old man with a face like tree bark and hands permanently stained with soil, squinted at the slip of paper David showed him. Nathaniel Hill, 1960. Yes, sir, David said, He frowned and nodded slowly. Small headstone, almost lost in the weeds. Follow the willow past the family plots. You'll see him. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, and the further we walked, the quieter it got. The birds grew sparse, the wind more reverent. And then we saw it, a willow tree, bent and whispering, its branches veiling a small gray stone. The name carved there had been worn down by decades of rain and sun, but it was still legible. Nathaniel John Hill, 1956 to 1960. Our little star. The inscription broke me. David crouched and ran his fingers over the stone. He was real. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We knelt there in silence. Two grown men, strangers to the boy beneath our feet, yet bound in by blood and loss. I wondered what he was like. I said softly. David smiled sadly. I bet he had Dad's stubbornness. And Mom's laugh. We left flowers. Wild ones we picked along the path. No plastic, no fanfare. Just something living to honor something lost. Back at the house, the silence felt different, less oppressive, as if the house itself had sighed. That evening, we combed through more boxes, photos, journals, receipts from grocery stores that didn't exist anymore. We were piecing together a puzzle, without a picture. In one of Mom's old recipe books, David found something folded between the pages. A drawing, crayon on construction paper, a child scrawl. It was of a tree, a big willow. A tiny boy stood beneath it, holding hands with a man. Both were smiling. On the back, me and Daddy at the tree, Nathaniel's name was written in the corner. David passed it to me, his eyes glassy. They were happy. Once. We put on the fridge. Later that night, I couldn't sleep again. I wandered the hallways, my footsteps echoing faintly. Every corner of that house felt alive with memory, with silence. In the upstairs hallway, I stopped outside the locked room again, the one with the warped door and broken handle. This time, I tried the knob and it opened. The room smelled like cedar and lavender. Inside, everything was tiny. A small bed with rocket ship sheets, shelves with toys long since dulled by time, a rocking horse, a mobile still hanging from the ceiling, tangled and motionless. I stepped in slowly, not wanting to disturb it. The past. There was a photo on the nightstand. Mom, Dad, and Nathaniel. All three together. She looked younger, radiant. He looked proud. And the boy in the middle. He looked like both of us. I sank to the floor, the photo in my lap, tears spilling without warning. This was the room they couldn't bear to enter. The room they locked up tight and never spoke of. It had waited, untouched, for decades. David found me there an hour later. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder as we looked around. We should leave it as is, he whispered. This room, let it be his. I nodded. Yeah. We sat there a long time. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt like it was remembering. And so were we. We woke up early, the house still cloaked in morning shadows. David was already at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. The bourbon from last night long settled in his bones. I poured myself a mug and sat across from him. The quiet between us less tense than before, more like an understanding. I called the county office, he said, sliding a legal pad across the table. A number was jotted at the top, along with the name of a cemetery. Cedar Grove. They had a record? He nodded. Unmarked grave. Plot number, but no stone. Just grass and a line on a map. Cedar Grove was on the edge of town, near the road that used to take us to school. I remember the old gate, the way the trees arched over the path like reaching arms. We didn't say much on the drive, just let the static of the radio fill in the silence, the same way we had in the attic. The cemetery was quiet, dew still clinging to the grass. We followed the map David had printed until we reached the spot. Plot 8C, no marker, just a small dip in the earth beneath a gnarled apple tree. David crouched, brushing his hand over the grass. This is it. I stood a few feet back, staring at the tree. It was older than us, maybe older than the house. Its trunk was twisted like a clenched fist, branches tangled with time. And yet, There were tiny buds, signs of life. We should do something, I said. A marker, a stone, something simple. David nodded. Yeah, he deserves that. We stood there a long time. The breeze shook loose a few petals from a nearby bush, and they floated down like snow, soft and silent. Back at the house, something shifted. The attic no longer felt like a tomb. It was just storage, a place where memories slept. We spent the day cleaning, not because we had to, but because it felt like honoring the space. It was late afternoon when David called out. I was downstairs in the laundry room, sorting through a pile of old linens. Hey, you need to see this. I climbed the stairs and found him in what used to be our mother's sewing room. He stood beside the far wall, where a bookcase had always stood. Help me move this. We dragged the shelf aside, revealing something unexpected. A narrow door, almost hidden in the paneling. Was this always here? David shook his head. I don't think so. The door creaked as it opened. Inside was a small room, more of a crawl space, really. Dusty and dim, but not abandoned. There was a single chair, a stack of notebooks, and on the wall, dozens of photographs pinned like a constellation. They were all of children, some black and white, some faded color. And in the center, the boy with our father's eyes, Nathaniel. David reached for one of the notebooks. He opened it slowly, flipping through pages of careful handwriting. It's Mom's journal. We sat down on the floor again as we had in the attic. He read aloud. I come here when it gets too loud in my head. James doesn't know about this space. It's mine. Just mine. Sometimes I talk to Nathaniel here. I pretend he's still 5. I tell him about his brothers, about their first steps, their first words. I tell him I'm sorry. We sat in silence. The journal went on. Some entries were dated well into the late 90s. Others had no dates at all. Pages of a woman trying to hold together a splinter heart. David looked up. She never really left him. None of us did, I said. That night, we lit a candle and placed it in the hidden room. Just a small flame, but it felt like something sacred. We left the door open. Let the air move through it for the first time in years. Grief doesn't end. It settles, finds corners to live in, hides in notebooks and crawl spaces. But sometimes, when we're ready, we can walk into those spaces and say, I see you. And sometimes that's enough. We went to bed that night not with peace, but with something close to it. The beginning of forgiveness. Maybe, not for what was done, but for how long it had gone unspoken. The house was talking now, and we were finally listening. The next morning was shrouded in mist, the kind that seemed to cling to your skin and settle into your bones. I stood at the kitchen sink, coffee growing cold in my hand, watching the orchard through the window. The apple trees stretched out in neat, time-worn rows, skeletons in the haze. David walked in, his hair a mess, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Ready? He asked, voice hoarse. I nodded. We didn't know exactly where Nathaniel's grave was. There was no stone, no marker, just a story from one of Mom's letters, a line that said, he's beneath the tree that bloomed twice that year. Whatever that meant, we stepped into the misty morning like trespassers on sacred ground. The orchard was larger than I remembered, overgrown in places, vines choking the trunks. Our boots squelched in the damp grass as we made our way between rows of trees. David stopped beside one tree near the center. Its bark was darker than the others, split in places. The ground around it was softer, sunken slightly, as if the earth itself had breathed out long ago and never inhaled again. Could be here, he said. We stood silently for a moment. David reached out and touched the tree's trunk. What now? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, he said, we remember him. That's what we do. We say his name. Out loud. Just once. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked. Nathaniel John Hill. The mist thickened around us. The breeze rustled the branches. And for the first time, that name didn't feel like a stranger's. Back at the house, the air felt different, like something heavy had been lifted, or maybe just acknowledged. David disappeared into the attic again. I found myself wandering to the living room, pausing at photos, running my fingers over the spines of old books. I stopped at Mom's writing desk. The drawers were mostly empty, save for a few pens and an old address book. But tucked behind the last drawer was something I hadn't expected. A cassette tape in a clear plastic case, labeled only with the word, "Sorry." I called David down. We sat beside the old tape player and pushed it in. Mom's voice crackled to life. Quiet, strained. "If you're hearing this, it means you found Nathaniel, and you found the truth. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the silence. For staying when I should have left. For leaving when I should have stayed." There was a long pause, then a deep breath. He was beautiful, and he was ours. And after we lost him, I didn't know how to be whole again. Your father, he tried in his own way. I tried in mine. We just broke each other in the process. More silence. Then, "You were never meant to carry this." But I see now that secrets don't stay buried, not forever. The orchard remembers. The house remembers. Maybe it's time we all did. The tape clicked off. David stared at the player. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the echo of her voice like a stone dropped in water. "She did love us," I said. David nodded. But she never stopped loving him either. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just sat there, surrounded by the weight of all the unsaid things. Later that day, we found a spade in the tool shed. Not for digging. Not this time. We went back to the tree, cleared the vines, smoothed the soil, and we placed a small wooden marker with his name, carved in our father's handwriting, copied from the letter. Nathaniel John Hill, 1956 to 1960. The tree swayed gently in the breeze. Blossoms had started to bud, out of season. "Blooms twice," David said quietly. I looked up. The branches above were dotted with pale blossoms, despite the season. Some stories, I thought, were not meant to be forgotten. Some names, once spoken, stay in the air like music. We stood there until the mist gave way to sunlight. Tomorrow, we would keep digging. In letters, in boxes, in memory. But today, we had said his name. The morning air was heavy with dew when I stepped outside. The grass soaked my shoes, and the scent of wild apples hung in the breeze. The orchard behind the house, long overgrown, reached toward the back fence like an unkempt memory. Trees twisted under their own weight, some half-fallen, others still stubbornly bearing fruit. David stood under the largest tree, the one we used to call the giant. He was holding something small in his hand, a rusted key. "Found it nailed under the stair," he said as I approached. "Old trick. Figured it must go to something." I stared at the key. It was thin and ornate, the kind that belonged to a diary or a jewelry box. "The cedar chest?" I asked, tried. No luck. We stood there for a moment, looking at the old tree. "You know," David said, "I had a dream last night about Mom." I waited. She was standing here in the orchard, younger, smiling, like she used to in those old photos. She said, "You missed something." He looked around, then up. I think she meant here. The tree's base was surrounded by tangled roots and fallen branches. Moss had crept over the lower trunk, and one side looked like it had once been scorched. We knelt and began to clear away the debris. It took almost an hour before we saw the edges of a small trapdoor, half buried under years of growth. "Help me," David said. Together we pried it open. The hinges groaned in protest. A cold waft of air rose from the dark beneath. Steps, earthen walls. What the hell is this? I whispered. A root cellar? We descended slowly. The narrow stairs creaked and shifted. The flashlight on David's phone barely pierced the darkness, but the space opened into a small chamber lined with shelves. Most were empty, but in the center sat a wooden crate covered by a rotted tarp. Inside were photo albums, dozens of them, and letters, newspaper clippings, a sealed envelope addressed simply, "To be opened when they're ready." I opened one of the albums. Inside were pictures we'd never seen. Our mother as a teenager, holding hands with a girl who looked vaguely familiar. The girl was in nearly every photo. "Is that Aunt Marion?" I asked. David squinted. "No, Marion was taller. This might be someone else. We flipped through the pages. They showed a life we didn't know Mom had. Beach days, school dances, the two of them laughing, arms wrapped around each other. The final photo was dated 1973. The girl had written on the back, "No matter what they say, I'll always love you. See." We sat on overturned crates, stunned. She had a relationship, David said quietly, before Dad, with a woman, and she buried it, literally. I picked up the sealed envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. "If you found this, then I trust you've grown enough to see me whole. Not just a mother, not just a caretaker, but the girl I used to be." Her name was Claire. We loved each other, but it was 1973. Her family moved away. Mine didn't approve. I made a choice, the only one I felt I could live with. I married your father. I buried that part of myself. But I never forgot her. Don't hate me for what I gave up, or for what I kept from you. We all have corners in our hearts where the light takes longer to reach. When I looked up, David had tears in his eyes. "She carried this her whole life," he said, "and never told a soul." We spent the rest of the day cataloging the contents of the hidden cellar. It felt like we were meeting our mother for the first time, the girl who loved, who lost, who compromised. And though the truth was heavy, it also felt like a gift. "I think she wanted us to understand," I said. David nodded. "And forgive." Outside, the orchard swayed in the wind, and the sun began its descent. But inside that hidden room beneath the tree, we found a piece of her that had waited decades to be seen. And we saw her, for the first time, fully. The next morning brought a restless energy, the kind you feel before a storm, when everything is too still. David and I barely spoke at breakfast. Our minds were heavy with the weight of the cellar, the photo albums, the letter signed C. I kept thinking of Mom, not the version we had known, but the version she had hidden, the one who fell in love under the same orchard trees that now bore rotting fruit and ghosts. We started cleaning the downstairs hallway after breakfast, mostly to stay busy. Dust clung to every surface. Behind a long-forgotten coat rack, we found a full-length mirror Mom used to polish every Sunday. I could remember her doing it in silence, focused and graceful, as if it mattered more than anything else in the world. David rubbed a cloth across the glass. "There's something weird about this." He was right. The mirror wasn't flush against the wall. A draft slipped around its edges. We moved it carefully, and behind it, a narrow door. Not hidden exactly, but forgotten, painted the same color as the wall. "Another one?" I said. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet hall. David opened the door slowly. Behind it, a small room. Not a storage closet, not a passageway, just a room. It held a single chair, an empty table, and a cracked record player. Dust floated like stars in the beam of light that filtered through a vented window near the ceiling. On the walls were more photographs, black and white portraits, each labeled with names we didn't know. But there, in the center, was a photo of our mother, teenaged, and Claire, the same photograph in the album, only this one was larger, carefully framed. They were standing in front of a movie theater marquee that read the way we were. I stepped closer. Something about the room felt reverent, like a shrine. David touched the record player and turned the crank. Somehow it still worked. Static gave way to a soft voice. Barbra Streisand's The Way We Were. "Memories. Do you think Dad knew about this room?" David asked. I shook my head. I think this was just hers. We sat for a long time, listening to the song play through its gentle crackle. When it ended, the silence returned more profound than before. It was as if the room had said all it needed to. We didn't touch anything else. We put the mirror back. We let the room return to quiet. That evening, while sitting on the porch, David spoke. She kept so much of herself locked away. She gave everything to this house. I said, to us. He nodded slowly, but maybe we weren't the whole story. I thought of the orchard, the letters, the pain and beauty we'd uncovered. Mom had been more than we ever allowed ourselves to see. That night, I dreamed of her again, younger, laughing, holding Claire's hand beneath the stars. And for once, the dream didn't leave me with sorrow. It left me with grace. The house had settled into an uneasy quiet after our discovery in the orchard cellar, the kind of silence that follows a storm, where every creak of the floor sounds louder and every breeze through a window feels like a whisper from the past. David had gone into town that morning needing space, or maybe just air. I stayed behind. There was something pulling at me, the sense that we weren't done yet. The upstairs hallway, the one line with family portraits and fading wallpaper, seemed to lean in as I passed. It was a mirror that caught my attention again, the tall one with the carved wooden frame, just outside what used to be my parents' bedroom. It had a strange quality about it, as though it remembered more than it reflected. When I leaned close, I noticed something I hadn't before. The floorboard beneath it was slightly lifted at the corner, barely perceptible, but enough. I knelt and pressed my hand to the edge. It shifted. With a little pressure, it popped up, revealing a narrow compartment underneath. My breath caught. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to our mother, from someone named Claire. I sat down on the floor, the mirror looming above me, and began to read. August 19th, 1973. My dearest Helen, the days here are slow, and I find myself walking to the edge of the bay just to remember the sound of your voice. My parents think I'm getting better. They say this distance will cure me, that I just need to be reminded of what's normal. But what they don't understand is that you are my normal. You are the one who made everything feel like home. Every letter was like a vein of emotion running from the past directly into my hands. Claire's handwriting changed over time, sharper, more hurried, but the longing in her words never wavered. December 4th, 1974. Your last note arrived tucked in a library book. I kept it under my pillow until the ink nearly faded. I wish I could tell you how many times I read it, how many times I dreamed of driving down Maple Hill Road and finding you waiting at the porch. But I know now that your world has changed, that you're expected to marry, that this, whatever this is, has no place there. Still, I remember. Always. I read for hours. The light in the hall shifted from warm to golden to gray. Outside, the wind rustled the old trees. One letter, undated and creased more than the others, lay at the bottom of the bundle. It was never opened, addressed in the same hand, but sealed. I hesitated. Then carefully I broke the seal. Helen, if you find this, it means you kept them. All of them. It means maybe you still think of me, even if only in the quiet hours. I don't know what your life became. I only know that mine had a before and after you, and I want you to know, if nothing else, that you were loved in full. You were never a mistake. I forgive you, and I hope you found peace. Claire. I held the letter against my chest and leaned back against the wall. The house creaked around me, a slow, aching sound like breath returning. Later that evening, David returned. I didn't say anything at first, just handed him the bundle. He sat beside me in the hallway, knees drawn up like we were kids again, and read in silence. When he finished, he looked at me. She never let go. No, but she tried to protect us, even from parts of herself. David reached for the final letter. You think she read this one? I shook my head. I think she couldn't. We sat there until the hall grew dark, only the soft glint of the mirror catching the moonlight. That night, I dreamed of our mother sitting by a window, a stack of letters in her lap, whispering names we were only just beginning to learn. The past wasn't finished with us yet, but neither were we finished with it. The first frost came early that year. By the first week of November, the ground crunched beneath our boots and our breath turned visible as we worked through the last of the boxes in the attic. We had planned to be gone by now, to sort, to sell, and to move on, but the house had become something else, a keeper of stories, and somehow a bridge back to who we were before the silence took over. I woke to the smell of smoke. It was faint at first, like the remnants of a candle. But as I sat up in bed, heart already thudding, I knew something was wrong. I raced down the stairs to find David already in the kitchen, barefoot, pulling the back door open. The barn, he said. His voice was flat with shock. It's on fire. We ran outside into the freezing morning. Flames danced along the roof of the old barn, licking up into the dark sky. The dry timbers caught fast, and the wind carried the fire like breath to paper. We grabbed the garden hose, a couple of buckets, but it was useless. The fire was too far gone. All we could do was watch. The fire department arrived 20 minutes later, red lights flashing against the frostbitten trees. They doused what was left, the skeletal frame steaming in the cold. The barn collapsed inward, a body folding onto itself. What wasn't charred was drowned. We stood together in silence. It was electrical, one of the firefighters told us. Could have sparked from an old light or wire. Cold air can do strange things to old circuits. But David and I exchanged a look. We knew better. The barn was where Dad had kept most of his tools. His workbench, his old desk, which he brought home from the insurance office after retiring. We hadn't been inside since finding the ledger, the one with Mom's name and those notes in the margins. Do you think... I started, but David shook his head. We'll never know. Still, it felt like something or someone had wanted to erase what remained. Whatever secrets the barn held had gone up in smoke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of the heat, the smell, the blackened ruin behind the house. I thought about what else we hadn't found yet, what else she'd hidden or he had. In the morning, we walked out to the barn again. The fire had left only char and ruin, but near one of the walls, something glinted in the ash. I knelt and pulled it out, a metal tin, warped but intact. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them. Most were of David and me. Childhood birthdays, fishing trips, moments I didn't remember but that clearly mattered. But deeper in the stack were others. Mom in front of the barn. Mom with a dog I didn't recognize. Mom smiling with an older woman who looked stern but kind. I turned one over. It read, Asterisk Helen, May 1968. Who's Helen? I asked aloud. David leaned over. Maybe a neighbor? An aunt? I didn't know, but I felt that name lodge in my ribs like a splinter. There was always more. Every answer we uncovered turned into another door, another ghost we hadn't expected. And yet, neither of us wanted to stop looking. Even when the house fought back, with its fires, its secrets, its weight, we stayed. Not because we were trapped, but because we were becoming something new in the ashes, something closer to whole. The air in November always had a bite to it, sharp and insistent, like the kind of truth you couldn't ignore. The days grew shorter. The wind whispered louder through the bare trees, and the house on Maple Hill seemed to groan more with each gust, as if it, too, was tired of holding in secrets. We had barely begun to understand what we had uncovered beneath the orchard. The photographs, the letters, the truth about our mother, Claire, still sat like fresh ink on our hearts. But life didn't pause for reflection, not in a house that old, not with time slipping through our fingers like sand. David had started spending nights in the house, said it helped him feel closer to her. I wasn't sure I had the same strength. I drove home every evening, the silence in my car giving me more questions than answers. But on the second Friday of the month, I got the call. It was just after 2 a.m. There's been a fire. The dispatcher said the blaze had already been contained. No one was hurt, but the damage was significant. I broke every speed limit getting there. When I turned up Maple Hill, my headlights lit the street like a spotlight in a nightmare. Smoke still curled lazily into the sky. Emergency vehicles dotted the lawn like scattered toys. And David. He stood near the tree line, wrapped in a blanket, his face hollow. The western side of the house was blackened, scorched wood, shattered glass, and the unmistakable stench of loss. What happened? I asked, breathless. He shook his head slowly. I think it started in the study. Space heater. I must have dozed off. By the time I woke up, the hallway was filled with smoke. I got out through the back. I put a hand on his shoulder. You're okay. That's what matters. But I was scanning the house, my heart sinking. The cellar, the albums. I got some out, he said, voice cracking. Not all. We watched in silence as firefighters moved to the shell of our childhood, a home that had already taken one loss after another. The days after the fire moved in a blur. Insurance reports, contractor visits, the smell of wet ash that clung to everything. But amidst the destruction, we found small mercies. A few of the photo albums survived. So did the letter. The crate from the cellar had been moved to the barn 2 days prior. One of those strange accidents of timing that now felt like fate. But the fire did something else. It woke something in David. This place, he said one morning as we stood by the porch, drinking instant coffee, it's not just about us anymore. It's about her. All of her. I nodded. You want to rebuild? He looked out over the yard. The scorched siding. The broken windows. I want to restore. Carefully. Not just the walls. The memory. The truth. It was a heavy idea. But it rang true. The fire had taken, yes, but it had also revealed. Like burning away the overgrowth in a field to make room for new growth. The community came out in ways we hadn't expected. Old neighbors dropped off meals. One woman brought over a box of newspaper clippings. Stories about our mother from her youth. We learned she had once organized a protest at the local college. That she wrote poetry for the town's literary journal. That she mentored kids at the library. She lived so many lives. I whispered as I read one of the articles. David smiled, and we're finally meeting all of her. One evening, we returned to the orchard. The tree stood strong, unbothered by the fire's distant reach. We sat beneath its limbs, a thermos of cider between us. The album spread out like a map of rediscovery. Do you ever feel like maybe this was her plan? I asked. David laughed quietly. To burn down part of the house? No, but to guide us. To make sure we saw the parts of her we were never meant to forget. He looked up through the bare branches, at the stars blinking into view. If so, he said, she did it perfectly. November crept toward winter, but there was warmth in our hearts. In the ashes, we found truth. In the silence, understanding. And in a house half burned, we found the beginning of something whole. To be continued. The dawn light seeped softly through the curtains, painting the room in gentle hues of gold and rose. I lay awake, listening to the quiet house that once held so many secrets and so much love. Today, we would leave Maple Hill, the house that had shaped us, haunted us, and ultimately healed us. David was already downstairs, probably packing the last of his things. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of the past had begun to lift with every shared story and every uncovered truth. We had come here strangers in many ways, siblings separated by years and silence, but we were leaving with bond forged in the quiet strength of forgiveness. I walked to the window, looking out over the orchard where we had found the hidden cellar. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, their branches heavy with fruit, ready to give life again. It felt symbolic, like the orchard, we were ready to grow anew. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor who had watched over the place while we were away. I wanted to say goodbye, she said, her eyes misty. You brought life back to this old house. I smiled, touched by her kindness. Thank you. It means a lot. As we packed the last boxes into the car, I felt a peaceful resolve settle over me. The house had been a vessel for grief, memories, and reconciliation. But it was time for us to carry those lessons forward, not just in Maple Hill, but in our lives. David turned to me with a small smile. So what's next for us? I looked out at the road stretching ahead, bright with possibility. Whatever we wanted to be. We closed the door behind us, stepping into the morning light, together, to be continued. Thank you for sharing this special moment with me. If this story touched your heart, please give a thumbs up and share it with those who cherish family memories and meaningful moments. Don't forget to subscribe to Golden Moments so you won't miss the next heartfelt stories that bring inspiration and joy to every day. Remember, every moment matters, and the best stories are still ahead. See you in the next video.